Now calling the Minister for Social Protection, Deputy Joan Burton.
Thank you, Alas Ceann Comhairle. I'm pleased to present the Government's counter-motion to the original motion set down by Sinn Féin in relation to social protection payments, and particularly those relating to child income support payments. I find it particularly interesting, listening to the debate, that Sinn Féin should be putting down a motion of this kind at a time when the Sinn Féin Minister for Education in the North, John O'Dowd, is overseeing education cuts that may see 4,000 jobs lost next year. And the Irish National Teachers Organisation has described this in the North as financial Armageddon. And I see that tomorrow public service workers propose to take some strike action over a 3.2% additional pension contribution from public sector workers. But it appears that while Sinn Féin are prepared to take tough measures in government in the North, they object to any kind of reform or any kind of tough measures that need to be taken here to restore our Republic's economic sovereignty. The Government calls on the House to reject the Sinn Féin motion for a number of reasons. Firstly, it fails to acknowledge that the economic situation that confronts us requires us to put our public finances on a more sustainable footing so that we can eventually restore our economic sovereignty. That's the critical issue for the future of all our children. And I acknowledge that the members in Sinn Féin do care about children, but so does everybody else in this House. And this is about the future of our children. And the future of our children starts with getting our economic sovereignty back. And if Sinn Féin, understandably, is concerned about that, then Sinn Féin has never explained why on the night of the guarantee you voted for the guarantee. So you have responsibilities as well. You have responsibility for your actions and your votes in both of the houses here, and they are a matter of the public record. The Sinn Féin approach fails to accept that the government is entitled, on behalf of the people, to look at how taxpayers' money is spent with a view to securing better outcomes. I mean, the better outcomes north of the border are a $4 billion cut. Just bear that in mind now. We are entitled to compare north and south. And I bear in mind what Deputy O'Snuddick had to say about a better access to public health systems in the north. But nonetheless, let's be fair in the comparisons. And what you have signed up to in the north is $4 billion. $4 billion of cuts is what Sinn Féin has signed up to in the north. And thirdly, the motion from Sinn Féin fails to acknowledge that the government's efforts will be directed at protecting those who are most vulnerable within the social welfare system. Ceann Comhairle, given the timing of this motion, I think the deputies have already acknowledged in their earlier contributions that I am not at liberty to discuss the detailed measures in the budget which will be announced next week. So I have to talk about the reform. I have to talk about the reform of the social welfare system and the general underlying principles, but also about the government's strong commitment to tackling poverty in our society through the social protection system and through other government measures. Within those constraints, as part of my statement, I am opposing the motion and asking the House to support the government's counter-motion by arguing the following points. I want to remind the House of the context in which we speak by detailing the current situation regarding child income supports. I want to outline my thinking in relation to the urgent need for structural reform of the social protection system, both in its delivery and in its design, so that we target the very significant amount of money that we as a society collectively spend on social protection, over $20 billion, so that we target it in the best possible way. I want to update the House that the Government has maintained its ambitious timetable for reform by establishing an advisory group on tax and social welfare, and we've asked the group to put its initial energies into looking at the very question of child and family income supports. And I want to place this discussion in a wider context by describing the situation regarding government plans to tackle poverty and to promote child well-being. The Department of Social Protection provides a wide range of supports to families and their children through the social welfare system. Easily the best known is the Child Benefit Payment, which is paid on a universal payment basis to approximately 600,000 families in respect of 1.1 million children. And that's the main child income support. The current rates of child benefit are $140 in respect of the first and second child, $167 for the third child, and €177 a month for the fourth and subsequent children. I just want to remind the deputies opposite that by comparison the rate of child benefit in the north is approximately €100 per month for the first child and approximately €65 per month for each additional child. And then in addition, we have a system of tax credits in the north, which I suppose roughly add up to our various child-dependent allowances and FIS and other efforts. So, you know, euro for euro, comparing the north, where Sinn Féin is in government, and comparing the south, I just want to draw to the deputy's attention the fact that the supports in the Republic are very much higher than those supports offered by Sinn Féin to children in the north. That's fact, right? A lot of media commentators, it's absolutely fact. Sorry, sorry, Deputy Ferris, the last time I heard about it, Sinn Féin were very proud to be in government in the north, and I've just read out the rates of child benefit in the north. So they're the rates in the north, right?
Please.
They're the rates in the north. So,
Ministers in possession, please.
A lot of media commentators don't seem to like the fact that child benefit is a universal payment paid to all families with children to cover that part of the life cycle of the family where any parent will tell you the demand on income is at its peak, whereas the capacity to earn income is often constrained through caring responsibilities. Child benefit redistributes our income from times when we have less need of it to times when our needs are greatest. It should be of no surprise then that universal child benefits are strong features of social protection systems in most developed countries, and I am a very strong supporter and always have been of universal child benefit payments, and I think it's an important element of our system that even with reform we should continue to maintain a strong element of. The other point that some commentators make is that supports for family with children should be targeted almost exclusively at those on low incomes. This point often seems to be made in ignorance of the fact that child benefit is not the only mechanism we have to support families, and that an increasing part of the total amount spent on support for families is targeted in this way. The social protection system provides assistance to low-income families with children through the payment of qualified child increases in primary social welfare payments and the family income supplement. Currently, qualified child increases are paid in respect of some 500,000 children. With regard to FIS, some 26,000 families benefit from a supplement to their employment income, which provides assistance in respect of approximately 60,000 children. And I would also point out a feature of the Republic's arrangements, which is that we don't actually make provision for children within the taxation code. We do it through a universal direct child benefit payment, and that's a system which has been here I think since the early 70s. There used to be tax allowances for children in the tax code, but they were done away with in favour of a universal direct cash payment to the caring parent, as usually the mother, as being the best way of delivering capacity to that parent to spend that money for the good usually of her children. and I think the payment has worked well in that regard. The Department of Social Protection spends over $3 billion, I should say, on children, 2/3 of which goes on child benefit, and that's about 15% of the department's spending of over $20 billion. One of the core commitments in the programme for government is the restoration of fiscal stability. Given the scale of the economic crisis, this government recognises that it is necessary to address all aspects of the public finances to ensure that they are sustainable and that fairness exists in the allocation of public resources. I should point out that in line with the growth in the social protection budget during the boom, spending on child income supports increased from just under $1.3 billion in 2001 to the $3.1 billion in 2010. This was largely driven by the increase in expenditure on child benefit, which more than doubled during the same period from $935 million to $2.2 billion. I think it is right that this government should look at all its options in assessing the best way forward. Consequently, the transition to a more balanced budgetary position simply cannot be made without affecting social welfare spending, including child income support payments. In the long term, this will help to maintain an adequate system of social protection for our citizens. So while recognising these constraints, the government is aware of the severe impact of the economic crisis on children and their families, and we are determined, and I'm determined, to protect them from the worst consequences of this very deep recession, and to be part of a government that is going to grow this country out of this recession and give those children whom we cherish correctly so much an opportunity when they grow up to become financially independent. I would remind the House that the EU and IMF programme of financial supports commits the government to a further adjustment of at least $3.6 billion in budget of 2012, including a reduction in expenditure of $2.1 billion. In making the necessary budgetary adjustments, the government is determined to do its utmost to protect the most vulnerable people in Irish society. I would say to the deputies opposite that I think our social protection system is in urgent need of both reform and transformation. I have been looking since my appointment in March at the existing social protection schemes and policies. I am of the view that the transformation of our system is required so as to ensure that it provides adequate and meaningful support to people so that they can fulfil their full potential.
And just to interrupt a minute, sorry, if you're, there's 3 more speakers with 5 minutes each. You have about 2 minutes left, Minister, if that's correct. Okay.
Thank you, Alaska and Corla. And within our social protection system, I just want to say this to the deputies opposite. And they were talking about families who are income poor, because I don't accept, and I think it's very bad to categorise children who are brought up in some level of poverty as being in some way or other deficient in relation to the love of their parent or their parents. I think that parents do their best, whether they're well off or whether they're not well off, for their children. So I think we should distinguish between households where there's an income gap, because most of our children are loved, and that is very, very, very important. Just let me say this in relation to tackling poverty and in talking about households who are poor. In some ways, a lot of the research shows that the families who are most at risk of having children who are poor are families whether parenting with one parent or parenting with both parents, or indeed with the extended family, where there's low educational levels and low educational attainments, so that it's very difficult for those families to have and to get a job. The children in those families, all the research shows, and the research is the same in the United States and in the United Kingdom, have a greater risk of growing up and going from being a child in an income-poor household to becoming an adult who's income-poor as well. So I think as we focus on trying to improve outcomes for children. The critical thing as we go forward in this budget is that we reform how this society gives opportunity and options to children and to their parents. And for that reason, I've spoken often of changing our social protection system from something that's described as being passive to something that's active, where we give parents an opportunity to get back to education, to get back to training, and ultimately to have an opportunity to get a job. That, in turn, is probably the best situation that can assist a child, in turn, to progress in school and to grow up to become an adult who, in turn, becomes financially independent. And I think everybody in this House, I hope, shares that objective. Just speaking briefly in relation to the budget, I said to the deputies, I can't comment in detail in the budget, but just rest assured that as somebody who has always in this House defended the interests of children and of families and of the notion of universal child benefit payments, that I am I just want to tell the deputies that I'm having those conversations with my colleagues in government, and we shall see next week. But it will unfortunately be necessary to achieve cutbacks, just as it's been necessary for your colleagues in the north to commit themselves to cutbacks as well.